Hey guys, welcome to a video talking a little bit about the upcoming Champions Rivals. Rivals Champions, that's the right way. Yes, Rivals Champions is going to be starting in 1 day and 2 hours, or at least when I took this screenshot, I'm sure it's going to be a little bit less than that now. And I want to talk to you a bit about the maps and what decks I think suit those particular maps, because there is a specific map pool for Rivals Champions that is a lot smaller than your normal map pool, which means we can talk a little about those maps specifically. We can dissect those maps. Now, I'm going to give you some deck suggestions at the end of each map. I don't want you to take that as absolute gospel. I want you to use what you've learned from these maps and the way that we've analyzed them to do your own theory crafting about units, because I would not be able to include every deck that is relevant here. And I'm always going to include the aggro and the meta GDI and nod decks because they're just good on almost every map. So we're going to have a look at the first map, which is called Hold the Line. This is a map that I have got some experience on. I've played a decent amount of it. And the first thing that we're going to take a look at is where the Tiberium fields are. You'll notice that there are 4 Tiberium fields in total, and they are all clumped up together. They are pretty close proximity to your base, which means protecting them is a bit easier than normal. It also means if you want to go double harvester, you can do on this map, as it's going to be easy to protect both of your harvesters at the same time. The only thing that you're going to have to worry about is how close those Tiberium fields are to the platforms, but we'll talk about that at the end. There's very few obstacles, which makes ground units pretty strong. If there's lots of obstacles, often things like air units increase in strength. But there are very few obstacles here, and also you'll need to notice that those 2 obstacles create some miniature choke points around the area that we're looking at. So you've got really, really good platform for ground units here. There's not many things obstructing their movements, not many things changing their pathing, especially in the contest points. And speaking of the contest points, they're all clumped up together, which makes zone control units very, very good. If you're going to run the MLRS or the Giga Cannon or even the Juggernaut, the areas or the hexagons that I'm pointing out here are really good places to position them and protect them. And like I said, with very few obstacles around, it means that you can body block those units really well. And if you establish a unit like the MLRS or the Giga Cannon in these locations, you're going to have control of both of the upper pads. If you establish it on the bottom hexagons, you're going to control the bottom 2 pads. So there are great places for the zone control units like the MLRS or the Giga Cannon. There's also a close proximity to the pads from all of the pads to the base, which means that reinforcing every single pad is going to be good. And there are no safe pads on Hold the Line. Every single pad is contestable, which means that choosing your counters and placing your counters as well as micro is going to be really, really important. So having units that can contest pads quickly and you having really good micro on this map is pretty important, because this is not a map where you can leave a unit contesting a pad at the back and that will be it for the entire game. Every single one of these pads is a contest pad. It is no safe pads on this map whatsoever. So some decks that I suggest using, obviously the aggro GDI or the aggro nod deck are going to work infinitely well. They've got great contest all round, and in general they're going to serve you across any map that you play on. Any of the zone control decks like the Giga Cannon deck with Oksana, or you can use the Lieutenant Strongarm MLRS deck. I think both of these decks are really good. And also Gasti runs a Juggernaut deck, which I actually think can get some really good work done on this map, and I think this is a pretty well suited map for that. So that was Hold the Line, which is a very interesting map because, like I said, very few maps have absolutely no safe pads. Most maps have at least one pad on the map which you would consider your safe pad, whereas Hold the Line, every single pad is contestable, which means it's very heavy on the micro, and establishing good control can win you the game. Tug of War, let's take a look at this map now. This is basically Hold the Line, but horizontal. Again, very close proximity for all of your Tiberium fields, but also we need to note that those Tiberium fields are protected by what you would call your safe pad. So this pad that's close to your base is the easiest to reinforce. It is also likely to be the pad that you are going to hold for the majority of the game, which means protecting your harvesters is going to be a lot easier. So double harvester on this map is actually something that can be achievable. Taking a look at the obstacles, there are some relevant obstacles creating choke points. Specifically the 2 lake tiles that you see there, which only air units can cross, although it doesn't obstruct shooting. It creates choke points between the 2 pads from that center 4 platform pad. Now, what this does mean is that you can set up something like a Giga Cannon or the MLRS on the very forward point of your safe pad, the ones that are closest to your base, and the enemy, if is protected properly in the middle pad, the enemy will have to move all the way around if they're not using an air unit to get to your MLRS around the outside or your Giga Cannon. Again, zone control units are good because they can cover the entirety of the middle pad. So like I said, if you can set up the MLRS or the Giga Cannon in the locations pointed out by the arrows, you're going to have complete control of that center portion of the map with very few weaknesses. But like I said, those lake tiles do mean that air units like the Orca and the Banshee are very good at taking out a positioned Giga Cannon or MLRS there, so you will have to be careful if you're deciding to do that. You have to look also the fact that the base proximity to the pads is very short, so reinforcements can come pretty quickly. So this is a map that will favor the ability to reinforce and react quickly. But it is another zone control type map where if you can establish that type of zone control, you are going to have a really good time. In fact, it has a lot of similarities to the previous map, but you just have a safe pad on this map, so therefore establishing control of it might be a little bit easier. So most of the decks that I think work on the first map will work very well on the second map. I do think this is a map also that, because of the way that the Tiberium is set up, that Double Harvester can work on, as long as you don't go Double Harvester at the gates and you choose your time for it. So tech units on this map I think can work too. And specifically, things like the Titan can work incredibly well because of the ability to shoot through that middle tile from your safe pad. So if you're playing GDI and you do like running Titan decks, this map can actually work out quite well for you. So that is Tug of War, the second map in the Rivals Champions pool. So let's have a look at the final map, which is going to be Blind Spot. This is the map that is definitely going to throw a spanner in the works if you're looking to run with the same deck throughout the entire thing. Blind Spot is a very interesting map that actually changes up the way you play quite differently from the way that you would play Hold the Line and Tug of War, which I think both are very zone control heavy maps. Because of the way that this map is set up, it is very different, and we'll talk about it. Because the Tiberium fields are split and are in close proximity to the pads, it can be quite difficult to protect them, especially because the natural Tiberium fields are on the bottom side of the map, and those are the ones that you would consider at the contested pad. I talk about safe pads and contested pads. The upper right is a safe pad for blue, the upper left is a safe pad for red, the bottom middle pad is a contested pad, and that is your natural Tiberium field right out the gate. Obviously, there are huge obstacles around the center, with the missile pad being in the center, and you can notice all of those rocks. Now, this means that air units get better on this map because they have the ability to fly pretty freely between all three pads, where ground units cannot. So if choke points are established by ground units, air units on this map are going to be very good at circumnavigating those and getting to whatever pad they so choose because of this area. So establishing some kind of air dominance around the center of the map is going to be important because air is so powerful on this map. And because air is so powerful, it means that the units like the Giga Cannon and the MLRS are going to struggle, as well as the fact that the Giga Cannon and the MLRS don't really have any great choke points to control, and there isn't very much good zone control going on. Running the Giga Cannon and the MLRS deck and ending up on this map can be very, very risky for you, which I think that's a really interesting choice of map to throw into the two. You'll also notice that the way that ground units are going to be pretty stuck going essentially through these big choke point areas that will be contested by ground units in its entirety. By having air units, you can move around the rocks and contest pads at your whim. So aggression is rewarded on this map, especially pushing up towards your opponent's harvester fields. If you are the aggressor and you look to abuse a double harvester build, or you look to just sort of win after the first missile, you could very easily start to strangle your opponent's economy because it's all around those pads. So you don't actually have to overextend much to get to your opponent's harvesters, which is a really, really important factor. Again, like I said, I think air decks on this map are going to work really well. The classic Nod air deck with the Inferno is a pretty solid one to use. You can even do the Inferno deck off a single harvester, so you don't actually have to go double harvester with that deck. Jade Zion's GDI air deck that she seems to run here actually could get some serious work done on this map. Like I said, it's a very, very good map for air units, just depending on what you're playing up against. But realistically, I just think throughout Rivals Champions, you'll see most people running the meta GDI and meta Nod decks because it has that spread of air, ground, and everything in between, as well as the fact that it can run very happily off one harvester, and it's very, very good at being aggressive. So whilst the Giga Cannon and the MLRS deck work really well in 2 out of 3 maps, you're going to come unstuck if you end up going onto Blind Spot with those particular decks. So you might be safer just running the GDI meta and the GDI, the Nod meta decks, which are those 2 aggro ones that I showed you throughout this video. But yeah, that's the 3 Rivals Champions maps. I hope you guys have a sort of a think about what decks you want to run on them, and good luck in the upcoming Rivals Champions.